Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna share with you some tips that I've learned from a different music producer. Now, before I share these tips with you, I just wanna clarify a few things. The first one is that I've learned all of these tips either from a tutorial or just by listening deeply to my favorite music. You can learn a lot by listening deeply to your favorite artist and also trying to find tutorials of your favorite artist. Simply go to YouTube and type in the name of your favorite artist followed by in the studio. Okay? And the second thing that I want to clarify is that any of these tips have a specific genre that can be applied to. It doesn't matter the type of music that you make, simply give it a try to some of these tips and see if also works for you. Okay? So with that said, let's have a look to the first tip. Don't overthink about reverb. Okay, so I've learned this tip from Ben Böhme on a tutorial together with Production Music Live where he breaks down his track Beyond Belief. Now, I was really excited to watch this tutorial because I really love this track and I really want to see the bones inside of this track. Now, I've learned so many things out of this tutorial, but there was one single thing that really caught my attention, and is that Ben doesn't mention anything about the reverb. In fact, Franco, who is the founder of Production Music Live and also the one who drives this tutorial, he adds a chapter at the end of this tutorial where Franco, not Ben, shows the reverb that Ben Böhme used. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Ben doesn't care about reverb. Of course he does. Now, the point of this tip is to pick up one or two different good sounding reverb plugins, set them up as a send. You can set the first one as a room or short reverb and the second one as a long reverb and just move on, okay? Because if you start to overthink about reverb and you start to apply different reverbs as an insert to different elements of your track, then your track might end up sounding muddy and you can also mess up the stereo field. So I highly recommend you to try out this tip, okay? Now let's have a look to the next tip, which is also related to reverb. Try drums. Okay, so I've learned this tip from Lane 8, another melodic house producer. Now, I've learned this tip from a tutorial that he does together with Point Blank Music School. Now, on this tutorial, Daniel mentioned that he likes dry drums, and I have to recognize that I'm agree with him, and it also makes sense, especially for electronic music. Now, the drums on electronic music are a really important section of a track. Now, normally you want the drums to be punchy and right in your face. So if you start to apply a lot of reverb to the drums, you are gonna add depth, which means that you are gonna push the drums back into the mix, and you can also mess up the stereo of the drums, okay? Now again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't apply reverb to the drums. What you can do instead, you can reduce the mix amount that you apply to your drums. For instance, if you normally apply like a 25 or 30% of the mix knob to your drums, first try to reduce the mix knob to around 10 or maximum 50%. And also try to reduce the decay knob of the reverb to make a really short reverb. Now, of course, you can also use reverb as a sound design for a certain sound, but again, try to keep your drums more on the dry side. Okay, now let's have a look to the next tip: creativity. Okay, so this tip is about trying to be more creative, and I've learned this tip from Jon Bellion. Now, Jon Bellion is definitely one of my favorite artists, and Jon Bellion have a lot of videos out there, like for example on YouTube, where he shows his process while producing music. In my opinion, all of these videos are an incredible source of inspiration, because you can see that the creativity of Jon Bellion doesn't have limits. He used pretty much everything to create music, from a synthesizer, real instruments, the drums. He also used his voice as an instrument to create effects or also drums. You might like John's Bellion music or not, but I highly recommend you to give it a try because you can learn so many things and it can help you to get out of your comfort zone, which is something really important if you want to develop your sound as a music producer. Okay, and now let's have a look to the next tip. It's all about music. Okay, so first I've learned this tip from Avicii, who unfortunately passed away on 2018. Now, what I've learned from Avicii is that it's all about music, his melodies, his chord progression, etc. Now, if you think about Avicii's music, especially at the beginning of his career, he made music mainly for mainstream, right? For a festival, etc. Now, if you compare his music with a similar artists like Alesso, Hardwell, etc., the quality of the music of Avicii, it wasn't the same as all of these different artists. Now, again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the quality of Avicii's music is bad. Definitely not. His music, especially at the beginning, at least covered the standard to be playing on a festival or with a big system, okay? Now, even though it doesn't have the best quality, his music was playing all around the world. And that's all because of the music, his melodies, his chord progression, his sound selection, etc. So that's what I've learned from Avicii. It's all about the music and not about the quality, which means that don't struggle trying to get the best quality out of your track. Just focus more on the music because it's definitely more important than the quality. Okay? Now let's have a look to the next tip, which is related to music theory. There is no right or wrong in music. Okay, so I've learned this trick from two different artists. The first one, and the one that you might know, is Jacob Collier. And the second one is Ricardo Curto, who is a producer and also owner of Yamaha Music School in Valencia, Spain. Now, I did a course in this academy back on 2010, which is music theory applied to electronic music. Now, I've learned so many things on this course, but there was one that really caught my attention. And he explained to us that there is no right or wrong in music. Now, let me explain you this sentence with an example, okay? So let's imagine, especially at the beginning, or if you don't have much experience about music theory, that when you start a new track, normally you are gonna pick up a scale, okay? Let's put as an example C major. Now, C major have 7 different notes. Again, in the case of C majors, are all of the white notes. So when you start to build the harmony, you create the chord progression, you create your bass line, and then you start to create the melody. Now, while you're creating a melody, you play a note that is out of the scale. In this case, a black note, right? So what you are gonna do, you are gonna think that's wrong note. So you are gonna move this note inside of the scale, okay? But you have to understand that you don't have to do that. Again, there is no right or wrong in music. You can of course play a note out of a scale. In fact, it also have a name, an accidental note or a passing note, okay? And it can not only be applied to a melody, even on a chord progression. So let's imagine that inside of your chord progression, you have a specific chord, and inside of this chord, you are playing a note that is out of the scale. It doesn't mean that's wrong. The only thing that is important is that if sounds good or not. So if sounds good, you can of course play this note that is out of the scale, okay? You can also change the scale inside of the same song. For example, you can start the song with one scale and then change the scale at some point of the track. Again, the point of this tip is that there is no right or wrong on music. The only thing that matters is if sounds good or not, okay? And last, let's have a look to the last tip, which, spoiler alert, is a double tip, okay? Let's have a look to the first one. Humanize your music. Okay, so I've learned these tips from Disclosure. Now, if you are familiar with the tutorials of a guy who is part of the Disclosure, then you already know that he doesn't like to quantize everything, okay? Which means that it's a really good practice if you want to humanize your tracks to move things slightly from the grid. Now, he does it quite a lot, especially on the clap and snare, but it can also be really effective on cymbals and also on different music elements. But you have to be careful, as if you start to move a lot of things out of the grid, then your track might end up sounding weird. But again, let's think about a musician. How a musician play the piano, he never play all of the notes at the same time with the same intensity. So you can use the tools that you have on your DAW and make it feel a bit more human and real. You can play with the velocity, randomize the velocity of the different notes. You can select randomly some notes and move it slightly out of the grid, okay? And the second tip that I've learned from Disclosure, it's something that it wasn't new from me, which is the power of a template. Now, when I saw the first time the template of a guy who is one of the members of Disclosure, I already had my own template, but it was really basic. I just have the playlist divided by section and color, and I also have the mixer organized by section, by color, and with the basic routing. So then after I saw the template of Guy, it really caught my attention the amount of plugins that he has on his template, instruments, effects, etc. So then I decided to update my own template. Now, I didn't do anything in terms of instruments because I use different instruments depending of the track that I'm working on. But I definitely update the mixer section of my own templates. So I add a tons of plugins that I always use on my production. I also have an entire chain, like for example on my drum bass. Okay, so that's the point of this tip. If you create your own template, can save you a lot of hours of work. Now on my channel, I have different videos talking about templates. I have a basic template that you can use it as a starting point to create your own template. I also have the MXT template, which is a really cool template that also includes the MXT collection, a collection of plugins that can speed up the mixing and mastering process, available to download completely for free for every FL Studio user. And I also have an advanced template video where I share my own template that you can also use it to learn how you can build your own template. So I'm gonna leave the link of this playlist on the description below. Okay, so these are the tips that I've learned from a different music producer. Now, if you have any tips that you also learn from a different music producer, please let me know in the comments below. So that's all for me. Hope you like and learn something from this video. If you have any question, please leave a comment below. Thank you very much for watching. My name is JonHut, and I will see you in the next one.